Hi, I'm Donna Wolfe from Naztazia.com.
Today, I'll show you some tips and tricks for substituting yarn in crochet and knitting. Many times we find a pattern we like, and they use a certain yarn brand in the pattern. Then you go through your stash and only find one skein of it. So you go to the store and find out it's either discontinued or sold out. You find another yarn you like and wonder, can I use this yarn for this pattern? The first thing you'll want to check is the weight or the thickness of the yarn. In this case, the yarn I need to substitute has a 4 with the word medium on the label. Depending upon where you live in the world, you might call this yarn by several other names. And as you would expect, there are quite a number of different weights of yarn and different names for them. The next thing we check is gauge, either the knitting gauge or the crochet gauge. In this case, the knitted gauge is 18 stitches and 23 rows in a 4" by 4" swatch. The crochet gauge is 12 single crochet across by 15 rows of single crochet. So we need to find a yarn that best matches these measurements. Here's a yarn that is also a medium weight yarn and has the exact same knitting gauge of 18 stitches and 23 rows. Our crochet gauge is the same too, at 12 single crochet and 15 rows. So when we look at the yarn's thickness, we see that these two yarns are a very good match for each other and can easily work in the pattern. Now here's another yarn, and if you look at its label, it's a medium weight yarn too. They only give the knitting gauge on this one, but that's okay since we know what the knitting gauge is on our special yarn. This one is ever so slightly different. That's not a really big difference for most projects. So I'm going to consider this yarn a good match for our special yarn. One other thing we should take into consideration is the fiber content. What is the yarn made of? Is it made of acrylic, cotton, or alpaca? And if you look at our special yarn for the pattern, it's made of 100% acrylic. So you'll need to take that into consideration, especially if the pattern calls for a nice, soft, drapey yarn for a scarf or shawl, or a stronger, more solid yarn for a handbag or blanket. As mentioned before, there are other weights of yarn. This superfine yarn is usually used in making socks or a very lightweight scarf or shawl. When substituting for it, you'll consider the weight, the gauge, and the fiber content. As we move up in size of the yarn, we continue to evaluate the same thing: weight, gauge, and fiber. Even in some of the largest yarn, always look for these 3 things. I hope these tips and tricks have helped you with choosing a good substitution for yarn in a pattern.
Thanks so much for watching my video. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel to get notified of new videos from me each week. And if you liked the video you just watched, be sure to check out my next video, which I think you'll like very much.